Hola amigos, ¿cómo estás? ¿Está bien? Buen día. Yo hablo italiano, español, japonés, muchas lenguas. No, solamente English. First of all, es un grande honor. Yo pruebo en español un poquito, ¿no? ¿Va bien? Es un grande honor mío, mío, el tiempo en Cuba, 10 reuniones en Cuba. ¿Comprende? 10 years that I have an opportunity to be here in Cuba. È un grande onore mio perché come un americano per venire in Cuba per ayudar todos i cubanos in entrenadores con Jesús Barroso antes il COVID. È un grande onore. So, gracias. I will now hablo en inglés, okay? First of all, on behalf of ISG, the International Sports Group, I want to thank the Cuban Baseball Federation and all the Cuban coaches for allowing us to be here today. It's a great honor because we also have a World Series champion pitching coach, one of the best pitching coaches in the world, Brett Strom, with us, who will present after me. ISG travels all over the world to help coaches. We fund the program where we've been to over 50 countries to help educate coaches, especially coaches working with young players, which is very important. So my topic will be brief. It will be about working with young players now in today's culture. And the culture could be different, obviously, in Cuba compared to the U.S., but I think there's some similarities. One of the things, when I was in Cuba last, somebody said to me that in Cuba, they're having some players, young players, that are also playing soccer. And that is happening a lot in the U.S. And they were losing some players. In the U.S., we lose players at a young age. Why? And normally I would ask you that question, but I'll give you the answer. The number one reason that we lose players to other sports in the U.S., and we have, by the way, 26 million players, amateur players in the U.S. We lose players because they don't like some of the coaches. They're not having fun in the game. So they find another sport that's a lot more fun. And soccer can be fun because you're running around a lot, especially for young players. So I'm just going to go over some of the things that I believe as a coach, as a manager, that is very important to keep kids in the game long term. That's the goal. The goal is to keep them long term, not to have them for 4 or 5 years and then quit baseball at a young age. It's to continue to play and to have fun in the game. Luckily, I've been in the game 42 years, and I'm still trying to figure out the game. It's not an easy game. It's complicated, and this is the scary word, it can be boring. Why can it be boring for young kids? Because they're not moving around a lot like most sports. Okay, so I'll start with how important it is at the grassroots level. Cambia con... No? Well, this is just information, just my information. Okay, and I tried to write it in Spanish, but I think it's half Spanish, half Italian. This was an article that was done in the U.S. when I traveled with Jesus Barroso throughout all of Cuba to work with Cuban coaches. And that was interesting because I learned more from the Cuban coaches than I was able to teach. And I think that's important also, that we share the information with coaches all over the world. This was some of the conferences that we had throughout Cuba. All right, so the number one question, why kids play the game, we know that that's to have fun. Why kids quit the game, because of bad coaching, and also because they are not being competitive. They're not being successful individually. So if you're 13 years old, you want to be successful individually, and that's our goal as a coach manager, is to try to help them to be successful individually. It's no fun to go to home plate and strike out 4 times. I'm going to find something else to do rather than play the game, because that's just not fun. So if we can make each player just slightly better, they're going to stay in the game longer, right? And we have to figure that out as coaches. Just because you're a coach or a manager doesn't mean that you know what you're doing. And I think education is very important. So as coaches, players want to feel part of the team. They want to get better as individuals, and they want to be in a winning situation. They also want to be able to play the game on their own. Sometimes as coaches, we tend to control the game for them. What do I mean by that? We don't let them play. We don't let them be creative. We want to tell them at a young age when to steal, when to throw to first base, when to bunt. I like to think of it as thinking outside the box, meaning let them figure out during the game certain things that they can do. If a ball is hit in front of them, let them make that decision. Let them be part of the decision making. Many times, again, we control them too much that the game becomes too boring. I'm going to go to the next one. Give you an example. This guy's no fun as a coach.
It's going to drop right off the table so you don't bail out. You got to stick in there. You see what I'm saying?
Ow! Son of a bitch!
I don't know of a player that gets hit by a ball and the coach says, now come on, that ball doesn't hurt.
That's worth it. Okay, here it comes.
Trying to figure out how to change this one.
It's all right, kid. You had a helmet on. Imagine if you didn't. You know what I'm saying?
Oh! Oh!
Will it change? Can you change it? Next one? I guess that's why I get to be first. So as a coach, if a player gets hit by a baseball, the one thing you don't want to say is that the ball doesn't hurt. But you hear that a lot. And right there, you've lost confidence as a coach when you tell the player that. More importantly, let them know that yes, the ball hurts, and it's just part of the game, and hopefully it'll feel better later. When I say think outside the box, think about the game when, as a coach, you're a teacher and an instructor. What do I mean by that? As soon as I change it. Still won't change. Is this not working? No? It's working? Okay. So as a coach, here's a special phrase. A coach will impact more young players in a year than the average person does in a lifetime. So think about it as a coach, how important that is. So what's your role as a coach and a manager? First thing, as a coach, in practice, that's when you do all the teaching, right? In a game is when you manage the game. The problem is we want to coach the player all the time in the game. The other role you have is to be a role model. One of the things that I disagree with a lot, and that is in the U.S., is sometimes we tend to use some words that are not very good with young players. I don't use any bad words around players. I believe to be professional, you need to use good language with players. You need to know your kids on and off the field. Positive. I just tore something in my shoulder that hurts a lot. I traveled 36 hours from Spain to come here. I could have a bad attitude, right? If I went to practice. But more importantly, I have to forget all that. I could have had a bad time at home, but I now go to practice, and I've got to be extremely positive in practice. The more positive you are, the more fun the players will have, and then you learn a lot more from that. Of course, you want to also be disciplined. You want to let players make decisions. And more importantly, allow your young players to ask questions. Many times we tell them what to do. Instead of telling them what to do, ask them what they should be doing. When they ask you a question, ask them a question back because you want them to think. I'll give you an example. The most common thing when a player gets on base, and I know I'm talking about young kids, when a player gets on base, most coaches will tell the player how many outs there are. I always ask coaches, why do you do that? Does anybody know why you do that? So they know the outs, right? Why not ask them the question, how many outs? If you ask how many outs, now it gets them to think. If we keep telling them the outs, they don't have to think. So that's just one small example. That's changed in the U.S. because it used to be, we used to just tell you what to do, and then you did it. Now it's ask them what we should be doing and make the players part of that input. Okay, the question now is, how are you developing your coaching skills, your managing skills? You could be reading books, seeing videos. You can have your mentors who taught you what to learn. But I like for coaches to be more creative. I believe coaches need to think on their own, develop things on their own. And as we go through the presentation, I'll show you what I mean by that. So as a coach, make sure you're developing. You've got to have passion in the game. All right? You think I got passion? I got married in a baseball uniform. Okay? That's passion for the game. My wife has passion for the game, obviously. That's the first thing you need, right? Of course, my wife controls everything, so I had to get married in a baseball uniform. So, number one, passion for the game. I got to see my notes. The other one is the ability to communicate. One thing I notice about coaches is their struggle sometimes to be able to communicate with players. Players should be treated equally. My parents always said, treat people like you want to be treated. So when you're talking to young kids, talk to them as adults. Don't treat them like little kids. Ask them questions, get to know them better, but understand how you're going to communicate to them. Know the words that you're using. Sometimes we tend to use some words that are a little bit too complicated. Developing relationship with players. Who's this guy? A very famous pitcher, right, in Cuba. Why is it important to develop relationships? The more you get to know the player, their family, their background, what they do daily, how they do in school, it's all about building relationships, not just about baseball only. And when they get to the field, finding out, how they're doing, how their families are doing. Those are all ways to build relationships. The ability to communicate daily. Do you communicate daily with your players? What do? I use WhatsApp. I have a group app. I communicate with them every day. I send them messages individually. I send them photos. I send them videos. I ask them, how they're doing, but I also know some of their skills, so I send them videos specifically for that skill so they can continue to educate themselves. Currently, with the group I had in Tenerife, Spain, 50 European players, having a WhatsApp program, I'm still communicating with the first team that won the championship today, 3 years ago. So I'm still communicating with those players. Why? Because I want them to know that I care about them, that I'm trying to make them better, and then I'm also asking them questions on what they're doing to make themselves better, because I can learn from that. During practices and games, pay attention to your players' actions. What do we pay attention to the most sometimes? Sometimes the best players that we have on our team, we tend to pay attention to. Pay attention to the 9th hitter, the 8th hitter, the 7th hitter, the players on the bench. Give them responsibilities during the game. Make them part of the team. Don't isolate them from the team, because sometimes we tend to forget them. The stronger they are, the stronger the team is. But remember, what's the ultimate goal? Is to keep them in the game longer, right? The 3rd hitter, the 4th hitter, they're going to stay in the game longer because they're more successful. The 9th hitter, the 8th hitter, the player on the bench, they might quit the game because they're not playing and they're not successful. So remember our ultimate goal. Know how to get the best out of your players. When you run a practice, how important it is to run a practice that's more game-like situation. So that way, because you know what game-like is fun. Repetitiveness is important, repeating, but at a certain point can also be boring. Now, we don't have time to get into all the different skills and drills and all that. We'll do that in the baseball session. But understanding how to get the best out of your players is very important. Managing games. That starts with practice, as I mentioned. It's dealing with pressure. So the more pressure you can put in your practice, the more successful they're going to be in a game. But the pressure depends on the player. Pedro Medina can handle a lot of pressure. Lazo can handle a lot of pressure. I could not handle pressure. So my pressure in a drill or situation might be a little different than Pedro Medina's. Because Pedro Medina, I can give him something very difficult to do because that's competitive for him. But if you give me the same situation, I'm going to fail right away, and now I'm not enjoying it. So the competition has to be with the ability of the player. I mentioned allow players to make decisions. Allow them to take risks. Where do you take your risks? You take your risks in practice. When you can take risks in practice, like take a larger lead, and you get picked off, nothing happens because it's practice. But now they understand their leadoff, how far it can be. But if we scare them into that and not making them take long leadoffs because we're afraid they're going to make an out, they're never going to know what the responsibility in the distance is. All right, evaluating your players. How important is that? When you evaluate your players, then you know, and you evaluate them for certain things like their time from home to first to second, their arm strength, their broad jump, how far they can jump. We have their agility as far as going left and right, bat speed, and then their body weaknesses. Once we evaluate players, now we can set up the practice according to what their needs are. Every player is going to be different. You don't want to train every player the same. So now they understand if my arm strength is weak, now I need to work on my arm strength. Now you give them the drills to be able to increase their arm strength. If their running speed is slow, you give them the drills to increase their running speed. So once you evaluate the players, then you're able to make sure that you organize their training the same way so they get better in practice. All right, helping players create good habits. Here's some of the habits that I believe you either start with right away in practice and also in the games. One, hustling on and off the field. You see a lot of players walking, or the coaches allow them to walk on and off the field. I think that's something that no coach should allow ever in games or practice. They should always be sprinting on and off the field. For what reason? One, it looks good. Two, it feels good. Three, they're going to get faster if they're running. Now, players don't like to run on and off the field, so we time them to see how long it takes them to get on the field, so it's competitive. Not only timing them, we also ask them the question, do you want to get faster? And then they say yes. Well, how do you get faster? Well, you get faster by running. Let them answer that question. And then ask them, well, what do you have to train in order to get faster? And they're going to say, my legs. Okay, so if you're running fast, your legs are running fast, you're going to get quicker. They have to be able to understand that. How you organize your equipment, who's doing that? The players are. Many times you see players come in, they just throw their equipment on the ground. Again, lack of discipline, not organized. They have to understand that at a very young age. So right away, where the helmets go, where the bats go, where the baseballs go. Respecting equipment. I always go back to the Japanese. Japanese never throw their hats, never throw their helmets. Ichiro said, I will never throw my bat on the ground because that is the tool I use to play the game, and I respect the bat. But yet we see players throwing bats, throwing helmets. Again, that's not the way we teach the game. Respecting other players, I think that's important. We just had a situation in Tenerife, Spain. The rules were different for different countries, and two players were arguing about that. Again, respect how somebody plays the game in that country and understand how they play the game. And I think you can talk about that to, kind of come together, because not all the rules are always the same in all the countries. Most importantly, respecting umpires. I know a lot of times we always blame the umpire, right? I had a situation in Tenerife. Ball was hit, very critical situation. The runner's running hard down the third base. The runner from Spain. Umpire calls him out. Player was safe. Players and coaches blame the umpire. I was watching the runner. After he hit the ball, because it was a ground ball back to the pitcher, he did not run fast right away. And then he ran fast when he realized he could be safe. Well, the mistake wasn't the umpire's mistake. It was the player's mistake for not running fast. So I think respecting umpires. What do we do to respect umpires? I put my players as umpires during practice games. Home plate will be my player as an umpire. First base, second base, third base. Now they start to understand what it takes to be an umpire. And you never know. If you can't play the game like I was not a very good player, maybe I can be a good umpire. Lastly, understanding the challenges young players have in the game. What are some of the challenges? Number one is failing in the game. If they understand that failure is part of the game, that's going to happen, and then training them in practice, not in games, and not telling them what to do. Training them how to deal with failure, which I had a very difficult time doing. If we can train them in practice how to do that and it becomes something they do consistently, then when they get in the game and they strike out, swing at a bat at a high pitch or make an error or make 3 errors, if you understand how to train them to deal with that, then the game becomes a lot easier. Great example in one of the playoffs in the World Series, one of the players in this year's playoff game in Major League Baseball struck out 4 times. All right, very good player. Came up at the 5th time, hit a grand slam. That's why the game could change so fast. If mentally you can prepare yourself to deal with the failure, you're going to get that successful time. But if you continue to not deal with failure well, you're going to have a hard time playing the game. And then they're going to quit the game. And that's the most important thing. What's another thing they deal with? Getting hit by the ball, right? We saw that earlier. So how do we deal with that situation as a coach or manager? Judging fly balls is tough for young players. How do we deal with that? So there's many ways, many things in the game that helps them deal with the failure aspect. Again, we can't get into the details of it because of time, but I think, understanding that. Earlier I said it's important to teach young players to make decisions. Knowing the number of outs was the number one thing I said. Ball in front of you, let them make that decision. Pitchers, deciding when they're going to pick off, I think that's important. Can they make that decision? And giving signs to the coach sometimes. I actually have a system where sometimes they will give me a sign because they see a situation in the game and they want to maybe bunt a runner over or do a hit and run. I include them in that process. Now, I may decide not to do it, but I include them in the process. Okay, and lastly, and I will close it with this. Whatever you can do, remember this. Get your coaches to not be traditional with the game of baseball. What do I mean by that? Think about what you did for 10, 15 years as a coach and ask yourself, is that the best way to train my players? Is that the best fundamental skill that I can teach them? Is this the best drill, or is there a better drill that I can do? Brent Strom's going to come up. You're going to see what I'm talking about here in a minute. Because sometimes we're satisfied with what we've done in the past. But in order to get better, we've got to figure out different ways to do things so players are more successful. So I always ask myself the number one question, is this the best way I can do this? And if I can figure out on my own, I don't worry about what other people are doing. If I can figure out on my own a better way, then I will do that. And I'll leave you with this example. Between innings, normally the first baseman does what? They always roll the ball to the infielders, right? And they're throwing the ball to first base. I always ask myself, why do we do it that way? Because we've always done it that way, right? So just because we've always done it that way, is that the best way? No. I learned this from Cuban baseball 25 years ago. Me as a coach, between innings, the pitcher gets 8 pitches, I hit ground balls to the infield. Somebody says, well, that's not the way you're supposed to do that. It doesn't matter. When you see ground balls off a bat, it's more realistic than coming from first base. Also, I have my first baseman throwing fly balls, ground balls to my right fielder. I have my second baseman, shortstop, throwing ground balls to my center fielder. I have my third baseman throwing ground balls to left field. Why? Because that's more realistic. While my pitcher's warming up for 8 pitches. Did somebody teach me that? No. I asked myself, why are we playing catch in the outfield with the right fielder and left fielder when they never do that in a game? To warm up the arm, but they're not working on their skills. Every time a player gets a ground ball between innings, they always take a ground ball and then throw it to first. What about a backhand, a forehand? What about dropping the ball, picking it up and throwing? What about different skills during that time? So the more we can get them to think differently and to train differently and to continue to train, the better. So again, I know that was short, it was quick. We're looking forward to being with the coaches tomorrow for 3 hours. That's where we really get into the heart of it. I just want to thank all of you for your patience and for understanding. And I look forward to meeting some of you. And God bless you all. And I wish you the best. And love Cuban baseball. And God bless you. Thank you very much.